Cuevas Verdin. Gretel holds an MPhil in development studies and is currently she's currently a research assistant working here in Cambridge in the Climate Compatible project.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gretel Cuevas. As you already heard, I'm a research assistant here at Cambridge University with the CCG team. So just to let you know, I'm a political scientist. So what you will see now, it's more in the political economy field and also from the development studies literature. So most of my work focuses on how actually countries can add value to their mineral value chain, and even a step back to ask ourselves whether this is possible in all the cases and to what extent. So as we have heard all the morning, we have the understanding that critical minerals are crucial for the energy transition. But what I'm going to talk about now is how crucial they are also for development objectives. So as we already know, minerals are concentrated mainly in the global south. And for these countries, minerals are also crucial for meeting their development agenda. So the question is, how can we actually guarantee that we don't repeat this resource scarce patterns of other resource booms? And how can we actually guarantee that occurs with fairness and also that are while also securing supply for countries in the global north? So giving this recognition that development is necessary for mineral-rich countries, and that also supply is urgent for satisfying the energy transition goals, there's this narrative of opportunity. So from consulting firms to international organizations like the UN, to governments in the global north and governments in the global south, there's this narrative of opportunity. They call it the path to shared prosperity. They also call it a golden opportunity. But the question is, what does this actually mean? And is this feasible for all countries? So firstly, I would like to highlight that there's a disconnect between the narrative and reality. So just looking at the electric vehicles value chain, according to IRENA, the extraction of minerals captures only 0.6% of the total value of the electrical vehicle market. And even in cases where countries achieve to go to the processing step of the value chain, the value capture only increases to 1.1%. So as we know, there's like 99% is missing, and actually achieving the development agenda, given the current values, it's a very unfeasible goal. So recognizing this disconnect led me to the question of, is value upgrading possible within the critical mineral value chain for all countries with mineral reserves? So firstly, I would like to highlight that there's a tendency for one-size-fits-all value addition strategy. This is mainly what in the literature is called functional upgrading. So this means that going beyond the current capacity. For instance, if a country only extracts ore, you try to take it to the processing stage, or if you already process, you try to take it to the manufacturing sector. However, this is not the only value addition trajectory that is possible. There are other ways that are rarely considered in the policy briefs. Secondly, there's a failure to recognize the role that pre-existing structures, both economic, political, and social, play, and how they influence the feasibility of these policies. And finally, we just use it as a buzzword like upgrade and value addition, but there's no clear definition of what we mean by this, and also how we can actually do it. So I'm going to introduce a very useful definition from the global value chain literature, and it's the definition of intervention. So it's basically all the actions and policies that are used to improve market access, upgrade opportunities, and also to distribute the risk and benefits in favor of developing country firms and producers. So here, I think the most valuable thing is the part of risk and benefits. We just talk about value addition without mentioning that actually going up to the next step of the value chain comes with significant risk. And nowadays, most of the risks are absorbed by mineral-rich countries. So by looking at governance, we can identify this, and we can try to draft policies that balance better these risk and benefits. And with risk, I mean economic risk, but also the social part and the environmental aspects that Brunil talked about in her presentation. So one of the papers I'm currently working on, we use a Hausman Economic Complexity Index to try and understand what interventions that are, so we can try and trace interventions that are more tailored to the current capacity of the country. So for instance, here's just a showcase. I selected several mineral-rich countries, some of the most common that are studied in the literature. And as we can see, there's a wide variety of capacity. But even in countries like Indonesia, is one of the countries with the highest economic capacity, where it's way behind from China. So achieving competitiveness in the renewable energy market is actually quite challenging and very hard. So just saying that a country that is this down can go all the way to achieve competitiveness in the renewable energy market, it can be sometimes misleading. So from something that I have found in my research is that actually mineral-rich countries with high levels of economic complexity, they can actually benefit from investing in projects beyond their existing capacity. However, for countries with lower levels of economic complexity, value upgrading may not be possible unless significant changes occur in the global value chain. So this is an example of the type of work I've been doing in my paper. So the GBC analysis is mainly qualitative, but we can, using the values of the index, we can trace the level of capacity that is needed at different steps of the value chain, and also where countries are located in terms of capacity. So for instance, this is an image that shows the copper value chain and the different capacity needed at different steps of the value chain. Just to be clear, where I've located the countries are the top 5 countries with the most copper reserves, but this doesn't mean that they are currently there in the value chain. It's just where they could get to based on their current capacity. So as we can see here, I think the most crucial part of this figure is that the jump in the case of copper, because it's different for every mineral, there's a big jump from extraction to processing. But once you get to processing, in the case of copper, actually it's practically the same as going to component manufacture. However, like for countries like Chile, if you have a mineral-rich country that is already there, investing in the next value upgrading, for example, to component manufacture would be a very wise decision. But it depends on where you are, on how the risks are distributed. So the next one is for cobalt value chain. So here, something very interesting is that here the jump from ore extraction to processing is way smaller, but then it jumps again to the component manufacturer and end use. So something important to highlight is that the entry barriers for every mineral are different. So this could also help us highlight and trace better value addition trajectories. In countries that there are several minerals, we can try and invest in strategic sectors that have lower entry barriers to facilitate the possibilities of success. Also, from countries like Indonesia, that although are not already in the capacity necessary to achieve for instance, the component manufacturer, with the adequate policies, it is possible to achieve that jump. However, the costs for countries that are lower in terms of capacity, the costs are higher, and then other considerations need to be taken. So just a very quick conclusions of this type of work is that, well, firstly, the major bottleneck can come as early as the processing stage, because I think in the policy briefs, something we talk a lot is like, oh, let's just go to processing as if it was something simple, when actually, well, as I mentioned, depending on the mineral, but the bottleneck can come as early as from the processing stage. And then minerals have lower entry barriers to downstream sectors than others, so this can guide us in the type of policies that we adopt. Also, value addition for countries with low economic complexity. Given the current system, I don't think it's possible. However, with certain changes in the international governance of the global value chain, it may be possible. So, and also, we need to recognize that the global value chain of minerals is highly captive. So this means that the way it's structured, it makes it very hard for mineral-rich countries to actually add value. So, and something that it's not here, but I think it's important, is just because the critical minerals are considered part of the energy transition, we think they're automatically gonna add value to a country. But in fact, they're just commodities, like, you know, like fuel or other type of metals. So if we take this under consideration, and we also consider that resources do not automatically lead to economic growth, then we can have better like policy solutions that actually help both the countries needing the supply of minerals and the countries supplying them. And well, obviously there's many avenues for future research from more tailored solutions for each country, but looking from the perspective of global North countries, it's the part of supply security and aid. So I think something very important that can be that some more work would be needed is what should be the role of countries leading the energy transition in promoting socioeconomic development in mineral-rich countries. So actually a very interesting paper that was published last year looked on how like Chinese foreign aid has been crucial for the supply security of China. So if we change the way we see at aid as a way to guarantee supply security, and there's a way that global North countries can actually invest and support countries in this transition, especially the ones that have higher economic complexity, I think there could be a solution both for the development challenges of global South countries and also the global North countries. So yeah, that's all.
Many thanks, Gretel. May I invite Alexei and Leonid back to the stage? We now have approximately 15 minutes for discussion and questions from the audience. And just to get us started, just a brief reflection. Thank you for your talks. I think it was fascinating to see such a wide range of issues related with the critical mineral supply chains. I noticed, just to name a few, we listened about the problems of alienation, disempowering, the problems about the role of women, land use, internal displacement, displaced people, artisanal mining, governance, just to name a few issues. So from your different areas of work, what can policymakers and stakeholders do to mitigate some of the social and environmental impacts that your work mostly relates to? Any ideas? Who wants to start?
I mean, I guess I could start, but
Please.
Well, so there's a few things, but can I actually react to some of presentation by Gretel, but that would be linked. So it also makes me think of the concept of development minerals that I don't know if you are working with as well. So there is a development minerals so those are researchers from the University of Queensland, and they talk about mineral security, but exactly in the way you mean it more. So mineral security, not exactly as securing the supply, but as securing the fact that the supply will also be used for local development in local countries. And so that made me think of that, but it's also part of the answer, because I think that considering that then in partners countries that they could also use the supply for their own development, and I'm sure that it would create a sort of virtuous loop. Otherwise, just a few thoughts. So I think that a very important issue is always about harmonizing the goals of different stakeholders. And so for policymakers, that's a very complex issue. But harmonizing the goals of stakeholders is absolutely essential, as well as considering the long-term consequences of any external intervention, because otherwise that tend to create side effects like resistance or coping strategies that will reinforce the initial problem that you tried to address. So those are some of the systems archetypes that we can notice that are happening in those big social systems. I also wanted to mention that there is the most tricky part for me will be to reconcile that we need energy transition, to save our world basically, but also energy transition to maintain more standards of living, etc. But if we don't do it in an equitable and a just transition way, so again Gretel mentioned that we need to try, and other speakers I believe, to try and not do in the same way as we did before, but that's really complicated to reconcile those things. But I believe that one of the aspects there as well is the cultural/narrative wars that are going, for instance, against energy transitions and also against mining. And yes, mining is dirty, etc., but we absolutely do need it for absolutely everything, and not just high technology, but absolutely everything, housing, and as we have said, also local development. So I believe that there is also sort of education gap, and that we need to, just to be careful about those narratives. And yes, I will stay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I also think that for this question, something very crucial is to define policy at which level, right? We can take it at the local level and country level. If you're a mineral-rich country, I think strengthening institutions and also regulation is a very crucial part. I think many countries also struggle to secure investment due to the very low institutional capacity they have. Secondly, if we take it to the international level, I think that changes in the international legal framework need to change. Considering that this is like a global goal, like a social goal that we need to keep going as humanity, we can put it that way. We need to go beyond the normal market rules to actually regulate these minerals. So actually, I'm working on a paper that is more focused on that part. And then there's also the part that I mentioned, the part of what's the role of countries leading the energy transition, right? The minerals are critical for them, for their energy interest, security interest, but by recognizing that they are critical for countries in other ways, and we can reframe the way aid is seen, and also like how policies are coordinated, perhaps better results could be achieved.
Thank you. Yeah. Alexei, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's very important to bring for policy making services like we developed also visualizations and maps based on real big geospatial data. So basically, there are two aspects of my work that are relevant to this. For example, for this network analysis, we can highlight the area with high potential risk, and so that even there are limited resources, they can be kind of focused on these high risk areas, and also similar things for mines ESG impact. It's also we can highlight and flag potential problems. For example, in Zambia, it's a pretty clear picture that for old mines, we have quite a low, high score of potential negative ESG impact. But for new mines like Trident Sentinel in Zambia, there is a very low potential negative impact score. That's kind of, I just want to say that proper use of geospatial systematic data would kind of facilitate this policy.
Of course, because not all mines are equal and the context surrounding them is different. Questions, Matteo?
I had a question for Gretel. we often hear with the discussion around critical minerals that artisanal mining bad. And I was interested in your presentation that it was more of the emphasis was more towards aligning it with the Sustainable Development Goals. And I was just curious on your reflections of is artisanal mining a good thing, and should we encourage it in general?
Yes, but yes and no. So thank you for pinpointing that. So there is in social science, basically, we don't like to say that artisanal and small-scale miner would be illegal miners. So we don't really like to use that term, but it's still very used in some instances. No, yes, there is also some illegal mining, but that would be led by gang and criminality, but that's not the type of mining we're talking about there. So it's the type of mining we talk here is mining that households are basically able to do immediately as a diversification of their household income, and often they don't have a choice. So there is a direct link with agriculture because of climate change. Some populations are being displaced, and they can't basically have crop that will yield any results anymore. So they have to go towards other areas and to diversify their income, for instance, with some artisanal mining. So in that case, then you understand how it's related to livelihood and the Sustainable Development Goals, in the sense to ensure the development opportunities and livelihood opportunities. The second thing is the reality. The reality is that artisanal and small-scale mining is already contributing a lot to the minerals and metals we have and to critical mineral supply chain. So it's just a matter of recognizing that reality and trying to help them getting into formality, into formal markets. Because if you do that, basically you have a range of benefits that will contribute toward the Sustainable Development Goals. It's not practical to just say no to artisanal mining, considering how implemented it is already in the informal economy and in the livelihood of millions of people. But yes, we do want to reduce bad aspects like, yes, environmental degradation, but also health and safety hazards. So it's more about trying to find a way to do it.
Thank you. More questions, Lydia?
Yeah, thank you. Fascinating presentations, and one of the reasons that we as the UK government wanted to set up CCG was to break down silos and bring together different disciplines and institutions in complex areas such as this. So it's really great to see that happening, sort of technical modelling, and also bringing in the economic, social, governance, GESI, etc. elements of it as well. I had just it's a very specific question for Alexei. There's something I just didn't understand, Alexei, which is, could you just explain a bit more about why you're using forceful displacement as a proxy for supply chain risk assessment? And also what has forced those people from where they area? Sorry, can you hold that while I answer Gretel some questions as well? Thank you. Gretel, fascinating presentation. Thank you. I really look forward to seeing the publications. You sort of just named a set of issues that I think are very important for us in the FCDO at the moment as we use aid, official development assistance to work with partner countries, developing countries, to support their aspirations to retain more of the value of the critical minerals, and therefore support their inclusive sustainable economic development, right? A statement which trips off the tongue,
yeah,
actually exactly as you captured is the whole world of complexity underneath that. So you made a pretty big statement, which was value addition for countries with low economic complexity is not currently possible. So that was, a lot of the countries that we work directly with probably fit into that. I don't know Houseman's Index that well, but, DRC, Zambia, I would get Malawi, I would guess that.
Yeah, I think probably in the rush of things, I made a statement as bold as that. But I think what I meant is like, countries with low levels of economic complexity, they can achieve greater value, but also changes within the global value chain need to occur, and different kinds of support need to happen. So for instance, a country like the Philippines, that they have a really high economic complexity. If you only provide them investment, they're ready to go to the next step. But a country like Zambia or like Ghana, I'm not saying that they cannot do it, or they can do it, but they need other type of support, like even going to the infrastructure part. And obviously, also something that I think that it's important is that maybe in countries that have like several minerals, that you can actually say, you know, the entry barriers for the processing stage are lower for this particular mineral. So we can focus most of the resources to this one, that the entry barriers are lower than just going to the next step of investing to a sector that has like higher entry barriers. So it's more how we distribute the risk that are associated with that jump and who absorbs them. So for instance, if the FCDO is willing to absorb more of the risk for these countries, I think it could really work in the long term.
Yeah.
And obviously it's just my perspective, right?
No, but really, and it feels important to link up that with the IP Southern African modeling. I don't know if you're doing that already, but they are trying to help countries develop policy and investment strategies, like optimal or the best possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a question for us as a donor, where you're working with a partner government and they have very clearly stated that their aim is to move up the value chain into processing.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you say, is that actually going to result in greater value?
Yeah, and also as I mentioned, like there's in the literature, like if we go to the global value chain literature, there's many ways actually countries can capture value. So functional upgrading is the one that everyone wants to do. That is like go like to the next step. But actually other ways to capture value can be done, like for instance, like process upgrading or product upgrading, or even for instance, the service sector. It captures a lot of value and it has lower entry barriers than going into the processing stage. So if we're able to guide countries towards this sector or toward a different type of like value addition strategy, I think it could work better. Because I feel that sometimes it's an overstatement saying that all countries are gonna get, for instance, to become like battery manufacturers. I think that would be the ideal situation. But I think given the current economy and the pace that we need to actually move forward, it needs to happen faster. Also because like to go from mineral exploration to a functional mine, I think it's 20 years in average to actually achieve that. So if you're a country with low capacity, like going from exploration to building capacity, I think it would be way more time than the time we need to actually supply for the energy transition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, regarding forcibly displaced people, they are also known as internally displaced people. Actually, there are multiple international organizations working and collecting this data. And basically, this data indicates significant social crises. And it's usually there are UN campaigns in developing countries, but actually they conduct this research all around the world. And basically it means usually they conduct assessment in camps where people arrive. And the idea to use this data for risk assessment is based on that if this situation happened, it happened because of very significant reason. And there are several reasons. So there are two groups. First, natural disaster, and second group is conflict situation. And regarding natural disaster, there are flooding, cyclones, earthquakes, of course. And conflict is also obvious. And unfortunately, in Africa, it's very dramatic situation, especially in Mozambique, in DRC, in Nigeria. There are millions of people moved. And for us, it's indicated in this area something important is happening. Unfortunately, they provide data as Excel sheets, usually without geolocation, but with some textual description. So we've managed to extract spatial data. So we know actually now how many people from where to where were forcibly moved. And we know the reason, so we know the magnitude. And actually, if we have a kind of large number of displaced people, for example, caused by cyclone, that means that it was a significant disaster, and likely there will be supply chain problem, maybe roads destroyed or something like this. So for us, it's an indicator, and we can spot this area. And then as a next step, we will collect multi-temporal satellite imagery to actually investigate these specific bottleneck areas. Yes, that's why we use it. So it's kind of encode all potential risk factors in just one.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we've reached the end of the time, but please keep the questions and the discussion flowing during the coffee break. We now have coffee break outdoors, and we will resume proceedings at 2:45. Thank you.